The remakes for Final Fantasy VII are games that are decently well received, but still, I think you'd be hard pressed to find people who think the remakes are better games than the original one, especially when you're talking about people who played the original one prior to playing the remakes. Now, when it comes to the director of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, he was asked about this during a recent interview where he thinks people should get their first impression from this story, and he thinks the remakes are the superior version of this. Now, there is a little bit of nuance into what he's saying, and I agree with some of the stuff he was saying in this. So before we really unpack all of it, if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And if you can, leave a comment, hit the like button too, because it helps me out with the channel. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth director recommends new players skip original and get first impressions from remakes. This is coming from Bounding Into Comics. Final Fantasy VII Remake Trilogy director Naoki Hamaguchi believes new players would be better served by getting their first impression of the game from Square Enix's current return trip. So yeah, this is where it's coming from. It was talked about during an interview where they're discussing the Switch 2 port for Final Fantasy VII. The director was at one point asked as to whether or not he would recommend newcomers try this out first before moving on to a remake, or would you prefer the opposite, to which he affirmed, in a lot of ways, that's a difficult question to answer. And in some respects, I can kind of understand that. Now, if this was a remake in that it was just a graphical update, then I think there is a little bit more to it than that. Or if someone was to say, yeah, just play the remake because it's the same thing outside of just different graphics or whatever, I at least could get behind that argument a little bit, or at least I think that's a little bit more sensible. But because the remakes for Final Fantasy VII are pretty different from the original, whether not only the graphics, but just the gameplay mechanics, even the story has changed quite a bit from the original one. So I think in that respect, that's why I believe people should probably start with the original before they jump into this. But the director of this has other things to say. A lot of people say to me that if they could go back and play the original Final Fantasy VII with no knowledge of the story and enjoy it for the first time, there'd be nothing better than that. The remake is designed to be enjoyed by people who have played the original and know it well, and also by complete newcomers who know nothing about it. So either way is fine. You'll enjoy the game and have a similar experience whether you've played the original or not. Now, all of that, I don't think it's necessarily a bad statement. I mean, it seems to be a kind of a safe statement, to be honest. We're asked about whether you should play the original, the remake, just being like, yeah, I mean, we made it for everyone, newcomers, people who love the original one, and we think people can enjoy it either way. All right, I mean, that's fine, but I think he kind of loses me in this second half. If you have the opportunity, I'd like you to play the remake first and enjoy it as a fresh experience on its own. There are definitely nods in there, so if you've played the original before, you can see how we've reworked things, and that's a completely legitimate way of playing. But if you've not played it before, I'd kind of like you to experience the remake first with the new graphics and presentation, and have that be your first impression of the game. Now, to me, a lot of this comes across as him being a little bit insecure, where he wants to have his game be the first impression because people are going to look a little bit more kindly on it if it's the first impression. Like people who played the original game and loved the original story, that's why they decided to remake it to begin with, because it was such a beloved game that they remade it, but they changed stuff up a bit. And like, I don't necessarily begrudge them for that, because if you want to justify people trying to play the remake over the original, because whenever there's a game being remade, especially if people played the game a bunch of times, they've owned the game already, then you're like, well, okay, why should I buy this new version of it if it's just going to be the exact same thing with more or with better graphics or something like that? So they do something else where like, okay, we're having a different combat mechanic. We're even tweaking the story a bit so you don't necessarily know what's coming. On paper, that doesn't necessarily sound like a bad idea, but then you're inevitably inviting that comparison as to which one is better. And most people would side on the remake because at best, most people would side on the original because at best, the remake will just come across as a derivative or something like that. Or actually, maybe at best, maybe that's a little bit too harsh. I could say at best, the remake comes across as something that was just unnecessary, but an addition that didn't really add or take away anything, but is still just okay on the surface. But that's not really a good thing that you want to have to be compared to. So I think that's kind of why he's saying people should necessarily play his game first, because then you have people looking at it a little bit more favorably, and maybe he's hoping that if they play his game, then they would just think like, well, there's no point in playing the original because I already played the remake. So that's good, right? It's like, well, no, it's not. But there's a people out there, or at least there's a portion of the audience out there who, if they play one version of the game, they're not necessarily going to play the other, whether they started with the original or they started with the remake. And I think he's hoping people who are new to the franchise, especially younger people who who might not necessarily be inclined to go back and play an older game from the 90s. So he's thinking like, okay, if they play my game, they'll get a good impression of it, and then they can move on and never have to invite that type of comparison. A bold and curious proclamation by any metric. Hamaguchi unfortunately did not provide any arguments to back it up, thus leaving it currently unknown just why he believes the remake trilogy to be superior first entry point for the series. However, he was just kind of giving his opinion, so I'll give him a pass on that, even if I personally disagree. However, he did speak vaguely to his vision earlier in the interview, meaning a question from Reynolds regarding as a fan yourself, do you have your personal expectations that you would like to meet? By explaining to his Nintendo Life host, my honest feeling is that yes, there is pressure. I can't deny that, but I don't really let it get on top of me. It's just so satisfying and rewarding to have so many people out there waiting for your game. Having so many people play and enjoy these games is really special. So I'm having a lot of fun with it at the same time. Okay, I think that's okay. So yeah, the rest of it is just kind of talking about the overall experience, but just kind of getting back to the main subject of whether or not the original people should play the original or the remake. I still say do what you want to do. I personally recommend people play the original, but his statements about trying to push people towards the original, it comes across, at least to me, as being a little bit insecure in that he's afraid that if people play the original first, then they might not like his game as much. And I think that's kind of a fair worry. But if you were someone who is truly a fan of the original, then that's the one that you would probably be boasting about. And like me personally, if I had the opportunity to remake a game like this that I really love, personally, I want to do it. But if I was in his shoes where I was working on a remake for Final Fantasy VII, I'd probably say it as much as like, I don't think we can ever compare to the original. The original is a masterpiece that everyone loves and people are still talking about decades after. It's coming on 30 years now since the game was released, and people still love it. Is the remake going to have that kind of an impact in the overall grand scheme of things? No, but if you can at least be somewhere in the conversation with it, or at least you could be remembered alongside it, even if it's just a footnote, I think that's something that you should be proud of. But instead he seems like he's trying to almost take over for it, or surpass it, or supplant it. And that's something that you just could not do. And I don't think you should even try to do that, or even give the impression that that's what you're trying to do with this thing. I think the remakes should be basically presented as something trying to pay respect to the original one. But of course, they don't make as much money if they're just selling old copies of it. So that could also be another motivating factor as to why they're recommending the remake over the original one, because it's just more profitable. And when you think about it, remaking Final Fantasy VII is probably just a cash grab. Even if it's well received and done with a bit more care, it's still just a well-regarded cash grab. But let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Also, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And don't forget to hit the like button and share the video out there, because it helps out with the channel. Thank you.